All right, everyone, we're back for our fourth and final installment about spectral music. We're going to talk about our third and final composer, and that is SAARIAHO. Excited to represent a female voice and a particularly important one within this particular subgenre of 20th century contemporary music. She is someone that I admire very greatly. She sadly passed away in 2023. Um, Her death really quite a shock. Um, and her music has a lot of theatricality to it, which I think really distinguishes her from Grisey and Marais. But of course, has a number of commonalities with those two composers. Born in 1952, just a few years after both Grisey and Marais. She is a Finnish composer who is based in Paris, France, largely, and carries a number of very important commissions with her name, including the New York Philharmonic, the Finnish National Opera, and the BBC, just to name a few. She studied in Paris largely and in at IRCAM, which is again where Tristan Marais, as we've just discussed, had an important place in terms of their history there. And prior to this moment, she was definitely more inclined to serialism within the harmonic language of her works, and later starts integrating more of the spectral sensibilities. So we're going to cover something from her works in the 80s and then a little bit later in the 90s. But I think that, her being active in the Darmstadt scene in the 80s and attending classes with Tristan Marais and Gerard Grisey is going to have a huge impact on how she transforms her musical direction. And so the other two composers that we covered were hugely influential as her points of inspiration and definitely led a huge change in what she considered an interest in her musical vocabulary and towards spectralism. As always, I like to start out with two or like an interview with her. These two are quite short if memory serves.
Every piece, even if it's not a very big piece, has kind of long story behind it. And every text I've chosen, it never happens like I would look at the book and then I would choose a text. It's always a long reflection, and what sometimes I find even embarrassing is that I choose the texts, of course, intellectually, but also very intuitively. So I choose texts which very personally touch me that moment. So in a way, all this vocal music, it's like my diary in a way. You can see texts which I have chosen because they have been important for me. So I think that every piece in this program has a story behind it.
And, just to point out a little bit of connectivity between SAARIAHO and Grisey, we just discussed a huge piece by Grisey. That's a part of a musical catalog or kind of a journal of his and all of his different journeys from place to place and things that he found inspiring. And SAARIAHO was talking about text and that same kind of relationship. So think it's really, really interesting. One thing, again, like I said, that really makes her language a little bit different from Marais and Grisey's is her inclination to include theater in her works. A little bit of this one as well. Again, short.
La meilleure manière de avoir la musique venir, c'est c'est d'aller tous les matins sur la table. Et au début, ça marche pas peut-être, mais se forcer dans le travail. Et c'est en fait de là qui vient finalement l'inspiration. Quand les gens demandent où vient votre inspiration, c'est dans la nature, c'est dans des... En fait, c'est finalement là. C'est là quand je travaille. Mais il faut avoir cette persévérance d'aller à sa table tous les matins. Mais finalement, c'est peut-être un peu comme les sportifs ou pour les musiciens, le matin, il faut s'échauffer et je crois que nous, les compositeurs, il faut échauffer la tête. J'étais très heureuse d'écrire écrire ces pièces. C'était C'était un bonheur parce que j'aime beaucoup les textes. Dans ces textes, il y a beaucoup de descriptions de la nature, mais ils sont aussi très sensuels. Il peut parler d'une odeur, de couleur. Et moi, je me sens très bien avec ces associations parce que moi-même, j'imagine les sonorités souvent avec des couleurs ou avec les lumières différentes. Donc, c'était une période de composition qui était très heureuse. Je réservais beaucoup de temps pour chaque pièce importante. Et chaque pièce est importante. Donc, comme ça, j'ai pas d'angoisse. Si j'ai une journée très difficile, je peux faire la cuisine ou faire d'autres choses. Et de toute manière, tout est en train de tourner dans ma tête. Et le lendemain, je commence, je me force à travailler à nouveau. Mais c'est un travail extrêmement lent. Donc, aussi une manière pour moi de fuir la peur de commencer une grande œuvre, c'est de commencer un peu secrètement de moi-même. Je commence à écrire et je me dis, oh, c'est juste un essai. Je peux revenir plus tard si je veux.
I really love that interview with her very specifically. I think that number of things that I want to kind of pull apart there, especially because she's also discussing her compositional process, how she engages with writing, and the idea that she is likening it to being an athlete and exercising a muscle and doing so every day. I could not agree with her more. My particular practice is every morning to first thing, before engaging with anything else, I spend time writing music. And as a composer who is also, like SAARIAHO, very interested in opera, opera is a giant undertaking, a huge monumental form. And part of being able to engage with a piece that's that large of scale is chipping away at it very, very slowly and incredibly methodically. You really can't put off writing an opera. You have to, it will come to you if you engage with it all the time. And especially this idea that, a composer is often writing simultaneously while engaging with everything else of the everyday is quite incredibly true. So I'm excited to show you a few more of her works. And again, we're skipping her points of inspiration because we just covered them through Tristan Murail and Grisey. We should start chronologically and talk about A Study for Life. I don't have any excerpts of this, and part of this is for a very practical reason. She set a section of a text by T.S. Eliot and then was denied the permission to get to do so. And while we can't play all three of these, I do want to just kind of reinforce her connection with text through one of these.
Mä sävelsin tämän teoksen Study for Life vuoden 1980 aikana. Suureksi osaksi se valmistui alkuvuodesta 1981. Tässä oli takana semmoinen visio, jonka mä sain, kun mä rupesin unelmoimaan ensimmäistä kertaa jonkinlaisesta omasta näyttämöteoksesta. Ja sen herätteenä oli tämä T.S. Eliotin runo Ontot miehet. Ja sen kantaesitys oli laulaja tai soprano Marjatta Airaksen diplomikonsertissa. Ja se olikin itse asiassa ainoa esitys, koska se teos valmistui aika viime hetkessä ja sitten oli tämä konsertti ja sitten sen jälkeen vasta mä otin yhteyttä tähän kustantajaan, jonka piti antaa mulle tietenkin lupa tämän teoksen käyttöön. Ja sitä lupaa odottelin aika pitkään ja kun sitten viimein tuli kirje, niin se oli ehdoton ei. Ja sitä lupaa ei tullut ja se oli kirjoitettu siihen sävyyn se kirje, että siitä oli turha enää keskustella. Niin näin ollen tämä mun suuri unelmani tästä näytelmäteoksesta ja sen kehittämisestä, niin jollain tavalla murskautui. Mä otin sen tosi raskaasti ja partituri hautautui. Muuttojen aikana sitten elektroniikkaosuus tuhoutui vuosien varrella ja sitten vuosia sen jälkeen niin Aleksi näki tämän jossain mun nuottihyllyssäni tämän nuotin ja alkoi ehdottelemaan, että entäs jos mä uudestaan kysyisin nyt sitä käyttölupaa tähän teokseen ja niin mä sitten lopulta tein ja yhtäkkiä sitten lupat saatiinkin 40 vuotta sitten teoksen valmistumisen jälkeen.
So, of course, after she's had quite a bit of acclaim herself, she acquires the rights to the piece. This is from the staged performance that was originally held in the early 80s, and this is a photo of the performance for which that interview kind of corresponds with in terms of time. So her interest in staged work was certainly early on in the 80s, and I think that, you know, that's a huge point of interest in her works in general, even the things that come off as absolute music for the sake of just music. I think that they are works that are ultimately that have a large sense of theatricality behind them. And we're going to see that in the two works that we're going to survey before the end of the class. Okay, so let's continue on to 1982. Discuss a work of hers that's going to be, you know, incorporating a lot of her experience from earcom, and that's going to be a huge interest in electronics as they definitely correspond to the timbral transformation that is potential within acoustic instruments specifically. So her, you know, there's two pieces that are written in the 80s that are kind of related to one another. Vers de Blanc, which is the companion to this piece, which is ultimately for orchestra and tape. So in Vers de Blanc, which we're not going to get to listen to, the transition is from one pitch cluster to another, where in this piece we're listening to instead a transformation of loud to quiet. In And again, the idea of transformation here is the thing that's most important to us. So I think we can hear the very clear influence of both Tristan Murray's music and Gerard Grisey on SAARIAHO in the 80s specifically. Um, Especially in this piece, this idea that we're listening to these sonic events and our main area of interest is again this idea of timbral transformation, of using these really rich colors that are motivating other colors to transform. And the basis for these constructions are again the overtone series. So this music is going to rely very heavily on unstandardized notational concepts because we're not dealing with things that have a strong sense of meter or pulse. So we're going to have a lot of like time-based scores, proportional scores. Um, in addition to necessitating a number of extended techniques from these instrumentalists. So, from the way that the instrument is played in a more kind of traditional way, like for example, bowing, but sort of indicating how much pressure to use on the bow in order to get a particular set of overtones, versus actually using things in a very non-traditional way, like um, creating percussive techniques on the body of a stringed instrument. So there's a variety of things that are being used here, and all of them are in support of color as our main area of interest and transforming color. Um, Again, something that other groups have been interested in as well, the minimalists, the post-minimalists that we covered last week, um, but to a much different extent, right? And with other elements that are simultaneously uh, competing with it. So, as a way of wrapping up SAARIAHO, which it is hard to do because she is such a fantastic composer, and if this is the first time that you are encountering her music, I would really encourage you do a deeper dive on what she's written. This is again a piece that is going to have a lot of connections with what we just listened to because it is a work that is indeed for orchestra. So this is displaced in time, though, by a considerable number of years. And there's going to be a change here from what we just listened to. I think in a way, we're dealing with and as you can see, there's a number of things here. So a really fascinating piece, and again, if it's of interest to you, I would definitely come back to this one, especially. I think that there's something really cosmic about this piece. It really reminds me of a film score, potentially more so than anything else we've covered. And that's kind of why I said that there's like a kind of a theatricality that is embedded within her works that really distinguishes her from Tristan Murray or Gerard Grisey. Um, and yeah, à la Fume, especially with those two soloists, the alto flute and the cello part, very thought-provoking colors that are happening here. So this one I especially like. Um, so that's just like the smallest and the briefest introduction to spectral music through the works of three different composers. I think that, again, just to kind of neatly wrap us up, the idea behind each of these subgenres that we are investigating is that if we're talking about the salient features of a piece of music, that each of these different subfactions are expressing these characteristics with a different kind of intensity. And there's only so much attention we can pay to everything. Like if we are a pie and we are dividing that pie into, our focuses of attention, we can't pay equal attention to all of the dimensions of a piece of music, even though a composer might want us to. We will either focus on, one, two, or three of the most salient features. That's not to say the other features are not interesting. It's just like, as human beings, we have that kind of capacity that's within us, or that lack of capacity or that limit. And so I think one thing that's really interesting for the spectralists is that we want to hyper focus on this feeling of timbre and tone color. And by eliminating everything else or a lot of those other dimensions that we have a lot of presence of like rhythm and meter, for example, in the minimalists and post-minimalists, despite the fact that they're really interested in timbre and timbral transformation, they also are interested really heavily in rhythm and meter as well. And so the spectralists have that kind of intense fascination when it comes to that one area, but so much so that they're going to disregard the other kind of features that we try to assess when we're listening to a piece of music. In any case, I hope you found today interesting. And tune in next time. We will talk about the neo-romantic composers, a very fascinating subgroup of 20th century composition as well. So I will see you then. Bye.